Very good morning. Welcome to UPC TV. It is another very lovely Friday. Welcome to our Pan-African Friday today. My name is Jage Nasebakula Zikusoka on yet another very good day. It's another lovely morning, and of course, shiny in Kampala. And I think most parts around Kampala, Molin Kenyana on Good Morning Uganda special today has been telling and sharing with us, of course, what the weather looks like. Welcome to our Pan-African Friday, every Friday, and it is the 11th of February in this year, 2021. Now, joining us today in studios, very interesting colleagues. Of course, Cold Monday Amazima, the usual Pan-African panelists that we are with here every day, and Nduguru Garama, the chairman of the Pan-African Movement, Uganda chapter. Very welcome. And of course, back to studios today is my young brother, Mr. Christopher Luanga. He is the head of the Ideology, Research and Documentation Department from the Uganda People's Congress. You're welcome, Mr. Luanga.
Thank you, sir, very much. And thanks, UBC, for affording me this opportunity to be around and contribute to a topic where I belong and where I come from. Okay.
Well, I'm happy to have you. And where you belong and where you come from, that's a very tough one for me.
It shouldn't be very tough because the genesis of our independence, the genesis of our Africa OAU, you cannot eliminate UPC and Uganda National Congress from the equation. That is where my roots are. But they spread deeper into other organizations like Mulungushi Club, East African Community, and the non-aligned movement. We are pursuing all that because UPC stands for nationalism, Pan-Africanism, and the spirit of internationalism. Internationalism brought us in that greater solidarity. The colors I'm putting on define UPC, whereby black gives us an African identity. The blue gives us the peace. We always strive for peace.
Blue is the color of peace.
Yes. Red gives us humanity.
The brotherhood.
Yes, the brotherhood, which makes us cut across continents, cut across boundaries, cut across families, such that when you know UPC, you will admire to belong to UPC and to see how we reshape, how we move forward Africa. We are the people who signed an agreement to advance the African revolution.
Okay. Well, you just talked about the Mulungushi Club. The last of the Mulungushi team there was the late now Dr. KK, who died not so long ago, I think sometime last year or 2020. What's that still to celebrate when the Mulungushi fathers have all gone?
The Mulungushi fathers have gone. They have left us with an important legacy. And that legacy is synchronized in their 5 aims of the Mulungushi Club. One of it was to ensure that there is total liberation on the continent of Africa, which we have achieved, and we need to defend it. The second was total freedom. Freedom is still elusive. Even up to now, we are struggling for freedom in every pocket, in every corner of Africa. The third one was economic progress and social progress. Wherever there is a challenge in the international economic system, in the global system, it affects Africa directly. And when it affects Africa directly, we have that biggest challenge. We have to continue striving. The fourth one was the consultation on international issues, global issues. Where you consulted when Afghanistan was being bombarded? Where you consulted when Iraq was being bombarded? Where you consulted when Libya was being bombarded? These are sort of issues which Mulungushi was pushing forward. Then the last one, a common platform, a solidarity like this one we are having today. In Southern Africa, it is known as Indaba. Are we having those platforms where we can share and we talk with the greater fraternity, with the greater solidarity? Please, brother, we are trying to build the standard gauge railway. How do we go over it? Please, Magufuli, the late, you have managed to handle this issue. Can we share the notes?
and see how to do it.
This is what we mean by greater solidarity.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Christopher Lwanga from the Uganda People's Congress there, of course, joining us on our Pan-African Friday here. Now, Ndugu James Mututa is not with us today. We just hope that he will possibly make way to join us via Zoom sometime later during the show. But on Zoom, we also have two other panelists joining us, and I just want to know whether they're actually ready with us already to be with us. But we have somebody from the African National Congress in South Africa, and we also have somebody from he's from the Gambia, but currently based in New York, USA. They will be joining us and of course talking about the issues that we're going to discuss today. What we're going to discuss is Africa's independence parties in modern African politics. Look at the terrain today, and of course the political parties that we saw ushering in independences in the different countries on the continent of Africa, especially during the 60s and the 70s. But just before we delve into all those issues, let me hear from the comrades here, Kolmandi Amazima and Ndugu Rugarama on Congo, the ICJ ruling on Congo. Let me hear from you, Ndugu Akol, just in passing.
Well, of course, you know, I look at that as some kind of selective justice because we know who has over-plundered Congo, who is plundering Congo, and they have never been taken to that international court. So the ICJ.
But I think it's not the court problem. Yes. If you don't go to court, the court doesn't find you there.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that that is selective justice, and we need to see the ICJ serving justice equally or equitably. I think, these are two brothers, that is Congo and DRC and Uganda, and I believe we can settle it in an African way. Good enough. The leadership in Kinshasa and the leadership in Kampala are on talking terms, and it's something that can be resolved.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Ndugu Rugarama, I read a statement from the Attorney General about our country's response to the ICJ. Yes, exactly, KK. The ICJ's ruling on our involvement in the DRC. And of course, to some people, the ruling comes at a time when we are also, again, in the heat of Operation Shujaa, still in the same territories. Won't we again find ourselves being dragged to the ICJ again now for Operation Shujaa?
Thank you so much, and good morning, dear comrades. We must realize that to start with, from the Pan-African point of view, that matter should not have been referred to ICJ to start with. I think it was within our means to sort out. This is an African problem, like majority of the other problems that we have experienced, and it was within our abilities to sort it out the African way. There are many issues bigger than that we have sorted out. We must also realize at what time was that case taken to the ICJ. That, if my memory serves me right, should be around Kabila time. And we know the role of Uganda and NRM at that when Kabila captured government, and at the time at which the case was taken to ICJ, our relations, the Kampala-Kinshasa relations, which were also not proper. I want to believe, therefore, in that light, that it was not what informed the decision of DRC to take the issue to ICJ probably was not well guided. One would ask, how come, therefore, that the subsequent governments, who are not necessarily Kabila one, didn't withdraw the case? That is a debate for another day. But suffice to note here that these are semantics really, because I will heavily agree with Comrade Akol that we all know, there is no way we can dismiss that, who has plundered, because I look at this present judgment, with the one of 2005, where we were being accused and we were found guilty 16 against 1, having recruited child soldiers, having mined diamonds and other related minerals, having trained and encouraged sectarianism, having and all these things which they found us guilty on, I can assure you they are not part of the NRM spirit and way of doing things. Of course, some other people would argue otherwise, but that is their, they have a right to argue that way. But at least for me, and any honest person who has observed NRM would know that that's not what defines NRM. Now, therefore, the judgment, which I need to read in details, by the way, I've just done a bit of the summary, also talks about reducing, because the demand was 11 billion, I think.
Yes, it was 11 billion.
Now it has been reduced
11 billion reduced to 4 billion, then eventually to less than half a billion even.
Yes.
$325 million.
I can assure you we are not even going to pay that. When you look at the
out
current,
of impunity, arrogantly?
No. We are not going to pay that, not because that we have refused to do it, but I can assure you, given the, and this is my last on it, given the relations now that we have between Kampala and Kinshasa, Tshisekedi and His Excellency, the two excellencies, Museveni and Tshisekedi, given our engagements so far, the bilateral engagements, which are deep and solid, I can assure you, like they say in economics, in accounts rather, there is what we call compensating errors. Somehow we shall find that that figure has already been, we shall create a suspense account and put it there, and later on we shall do away with it. So that therefore will be playing in the spirit of the Pan-Africanism, and it will be solving African problems with finding African problems, but with solving African problems with African solutions.
Okay. Ndugu Christopher, you didn't talk about that, Rwanga, on the judgment, the ICJ judgment. First of all, like Ndugu Rugarama says, going to the ICJ in its infancy or in its initial stages, ab initio it was in error. We wouldn't have gone there. Just like we find ourselves going to the ICC, even when we are signatories to these international protocols and treaties. What would be your take on the ruling of the ICJ against Uganda in their involvement in Congo?
I think Uganda is always very unfortunate with the issues of Congo. In most cases, competing domestic politics comes in to confuse the Congo question in relation to the services that Uganda is having. I would take you back to 1950s and 1960s. At the heart of it, Uganda was appointed by other African heads of state to help out Lumumba sort out the Congo crisis militarily. And Idi Amin was sent there officially to map DRC. How we can help militarily with the logistics and what have you. And Uganda started helping the Lumumbists, who were even residing here. At the end of it, external forces combined with local forces. And Obote was named as a thief, as a thug, as a looter of DRC, together with these three ministers. And this building next here was almost set ablaze underneath to overthrow the Obote government that he has stolen Congo products. Good enough, he was clever and put up a respectable commission of inquiry, which did its job and found that Uganda government and himself and his colleagues were very innocent about the Congo question. Now here, we are not innocent. We have something to pay back. And what we are supposed to pay back has been reviewed from those big billions to a small billions. But much as we pay it out of good spirit, okay, out of arbitration, which is international, that does not mean the end of Congo problems. We shall still be called on to play a brotherly Pan-Africanist role. If I was the Minister of Finance, either the appointed bank of governor, I would advise Uganda government to pay that money
The $325 million.
Yes, as stipulated. Because we stand to gain more when we normalize the relations with our neighbor, and we stand to gain more because Congo is part of us. And I remember when we were starting the national service in Chankwanzi, one of the official languages to be used was Lingala, Swahili, English, and other local languages. It shows that we are part and parcel of DRC. This money is nothing. Whether it was even to be $1 billion, it is nothing.
What about if the Kinshasa government says no, for the relationships that we have with our comrades in Uganda, we forfeit that?
I was coming to that, comrade. Thank you so much. You have just taken it out. Kinshasa also has got a right, even after the judgment, to say either quietly or publicly that forget about
We'll forget
that.
about that. For the relationships that we have, these are all things, water under the bridge actually.
In any case, we're already constructing roads there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
There's much more.
There's much more. If they actually looked at it and said, wow, this is just water under the bridge, let's continue, let's carry on. Okay, thank you so much. Well, I've just been told by the producer, we've got somebody on Zoom. We expect to have two guests joining us away from our studios here. One of them is Dlamini Mbatha from the South Africa, from the ANC. I just do not know who is online, and let me just know who is here. Okay, I am just told that it's Ebrima online. Good morning. I don't know whether it's morning because I know you are in New York now. What's the time in New York currently? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Well, something could have happened with your gadgets. Unmute a few things here and there. This is technology. I don't know what needs to be done, but my producers will talk to you behind the curtains to let you know how you can get to us. We were trying to see Ebrima Balde. He's a journalist from the Gambia, but currently based in New York, USA, joining us here on Pan-African Friday. We'll get you when you finally get a clear connection, and we need to hear you as you speak back to us, as we also wait for Dlamini Mbatha from the African National Congress, the ruling party in South Africa. Now let's get back to the conversation here today on our issues. Ndugu Akol, let's first of all talk about independence political parties, which in Uganda we actually call them the UB40s. In Uganda, majority of these UB40s do actually don't know what these independence parties are. Where are they in the modern Africa?
Well, the independence parties in Africa, I must say that most of them have since lost power on the continent. Some of them lost power through coups, military coups.
Many of them.
Actually, some of them lost through elections. So the few that are remaining, some of them rebranded and of course changed their names. Yeah, but ideally most of them have since lost power and are actually struggling really to come back to power. But one can also say that most of the independence parties that we have in Africa, those that have lost power have tried to get into power through the back door. When I talk about the getting to power through the back door, I'll get an example of Nkrumah's party in Ghana. Nkrumah's party in Ghana has since been dissolved. Now, it is still active, but most of the members have joined the two-party system that we see now, because we have the NPP and NDC. Yes. Now the NDC has swallowed most of the members of Nkrumah's party. Most of the members of Nkrumah's party. So you find that even actually now the party, more or less you find that the Kwame Nkrumah Foundation is more active than actually the CPP. So that is what is happening. Now when you go to Zambia, UNIP, you find that at one time UNIP was working well with Levi Mwanawasa. Yes, that actually at every elections, UNIP has always forged alliances,
coalition of sorts.
Alliances and coalition. Like for example, in the last election, it is an open secret that they were working with the FP. Yes, they were working with the FP, this one of Lungu. That even throughout Lungu's time, that UNIP was actually one of the partners. So that is how some of the parties are really working, the independence parties. Now, those that have retained power, like CCM in Tanzania, like Frelimo in Mozambique, like ANC in South Africa, like ZANU PF, one thing that has actually kept them in power is that they have not only built a political base but also an economic base. That these parties have assets, these parties run businesses, that a party can finance her activities. Now the other aspect that these parties that have managed to retain power from independence is that these parties are powerful than individuals, that they can recall anyone anytime, even when you're the president, even when you're the speaker, you're the secretary general, they can recall you if they feel that you're not moving in the direction they wish to take. So these are some of the other issues that we also want to understand. Now, the other biggest challenge, the independence parties have, even those that are in power and those that are not in power, is that some of them have failed to adjust. And that is what is happening to ANC in South Africa. That you find that some young boys like Julius Malema leaving because they feel that ANC is not moving at the pace the people want them to move. In other words, most Africans expected radical changes in the socio-economic structures of South Africa, which really they don't see. Now, in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, ZANU PF is also having one problem, that they are still stuck to their Chumurenga politics. Yet now we're into the digital politics, and that's why they are getting issues with the young people, because they are still stuck in those Chumurenga politics. They're still stuck in the politics of redistribution of land, and now the issue is not about the Chumurenga politics, it's not about the distribution of land. So these are some of the challenges they have. So I can say that for those that have lost power, they've actually tried to get to power through the back door. My brother Luanga can also tell me that UPC is also in power through the back door. I don't know because
well, I think that's very good. And let me just come to Luanga here and get to you. You've just heard from him. Now, there are those political parties, of course, that we know. Those that have still stayed and remained. The ANC in South Africa, we've seen the ZANU PF, he's talked about them. We saw turn rebranding, and of course they've held on to onto power until now. There are parties that you look for now, and you can't find them anywhere. KANU in Kenya, these were the parties that you could talk about. Come back home here, where we have the Uganda People's Congress. Now, one thing that stands out is that these parties seemingly had an ideology. You just talked about your party colors. You talked about black, what it means. You talked about the blue. You talked about the red. You can actually define what this palm means. If actually somebody asked you and said, why is your UPC symbol a palm? You would actually say that. Now, today we have political parties that possibly pick up anything anything, a color of sorts, and nobody can explain to you why we use this color. Nobody can explain to you why we use this particular symbol. No ideology, no nothing. Nothing is there that they can actually say, we stand for this. The only thing they'll tell you, a political party is not a business outfit that we are here to trade. We are looking for power, and for as long as we have power, then we have the power. What happened to the Uganda People's Congress? Now, as one of those parties, and where are you today? And even when you insist the political party has to be here, UPC for every good ideas that the party had, looking at the Uganda People's Congress of that same and the times today, would UPC suffice anywhere?
Thanks very much for bringing up such an important issue. But to understand the independence political parties, like in the context of UPC, you have to zero it from its foundation. The foundation of UPC, together with the rest of independence political parties, stems more from our ancestors, the great Pan-Africanists across the Atlantic, who saw the need that we have come to America, we have been oppressed, something must be made, must be done to liberate the black race. And because of that, they made several attempts towards Pan-African conferences, mobilization, and what have you. To bring you fast forward, all our roots are traced from the Manchester Pan-African Congress of 1945. That is where vividly Kwame Nkrumah was, Jomo Kenyatta was, this Kama of Botswana was, yes, this gentleman of Malawi was, and some good West Africans. And the message was, please, we have sat here, go and liberate Africa. Go and wage a successful decolonization and independence struggle. That was 45. Then we are ignited more when India got her independence in 1947. And India did not forget about us. And it inspired us more. This now enabled Kwame Nkrumah to come from Gold Coast sort of party to form CPP. And as he formed the CPP, things moved. 1957, Ghana is getting independence. This is now pushing us further. And as Ghana is getting independence, it is putting in practice what was doctored, what was agreed on in Manchester. And immediately he called the 7 independent African states, and they proclaimed that their independence does not carry meaning unless the entire Africa, unless the entire black race is liberated. So we are coming from a background of high values. Then in 1958, Kwame Nkrumah organized the All African Conference, where all struggling players, UNIPU, KANU, what have you, they all attended in Accra. And from there we got a blueprint that if Africa is to survive, unity at whatever cost. If Africa is to survive, continental things. And from there, Nkrumah even started establishing Kwame Nkrumah Ideological School at Winneba. Some of our people went there, by the way, when we got independence. And one of them is Munyoro, he is still there. Now, the bigger picture was now coming into play. High values which we are inheriting. And these high values, nationalism, Pan-Africanism, and internationalism. And as we did this international solidarity, it meant that we are creating enemies as we are getting independence. We are creating enemies as we are getting independence. But how do we barricade ourselves? Organizations like a non-aligned movement came in, and people like Satito or General Tito of Yugoslavia came in with appropriate technology to push us. So then as independence came in, we invested heavily in what disturbed our brothers and sisters in America, all independence political parties went to fight ignorance, poverty, and disease. Today, this is what is sugar-coated as Millennium Development Goals, as Sustainable Development Goals. And all the independent political parties and their respective governments achieved those Millennium and the Sustainable Development Goals under 10 years. And the enemies of Africa now got scared that what we did not achieve under colonialism, these new independent political parties, because of their grand visions, because of their grand values, they have achieved. What do? We need to reverse. We need to strangle them. And some countries which were more progressive were the ones which were identified first as a target. And this is why Kwame Nkrumah and his friend here, Dr. Apollo Milton Obote, were almost supposed to be bumped off on the same day, 24th February 1966, to throw a scare with the rest of other countries. So you are going to find that the grand values, the visions, these independent political parties stood for or stand for are a catalyst of generating very, very difficult policies. Because I can give you an example to understand it clearly. Tanzania decided to ensure that it leads the way with the Ujamaa or self-reliance policies. And in 1967, they launched Ujamaa. Ujamaa philosophy, when you read it in its context, it is about nationalization. It is about putting the citizen forefront. Then Zambia also said, I'm not going to be left behind. Kaunda, in April 1968, he launched the Mulungushi reforms at Mulungushi Local Authority, where again it was a massive nationalization. Then Uganda,
1969.
In 1969, 19th December, we launched the Common Man's Charter. But the enemies, external enemies with the local players, we are just waiting in Irogogo to shoot the Prime Minister. Okay? You can imagine going to such extent because of a progressive idea, progressive policies which are coming. And believe me, the 1971 coup, forget about the 18 reasons Amin is advancing. They were trying to strangle a progressive government. They were trying to strangle a Mulungushi Club membership. But they realized that the easiest soft spot is Uganda, and not Tanzania, not Zambia. Because for them, they had over-revolutionized their army. So, you will not see UPC today in the same way it could be seen in the 60s, in the 70s, but UPC is still there because it is based on grand values, which cannot go away. UNIP is still there, it is based on grand values. CPP is still there, it is based on ground values. Even in Malawi recently said we have over-experimented. Please, can you come back, Malawi Congress Party? And you remember Malawi Congress Party, MCP, had even a relationship with UPC.
MCP
yes,
with UPC.
Yes, because this is very surprising. I went with the president, with our current president, Jim Akena, when he was looking for a vote. And we reached parts of Western Uganda, I think specifically Fort Poto. When we were there and he was soliciting for a vote, there was a very tough man talking. You could not ignore his words. Then when we had an interlude, I walked a bit and I talked to the younger man. That younger man, come here. This is sort of firebrand, where is it? He told me, no, we are part of UPC, we are trained with the Malawi Congress Party Younger Pioneers in Zomba. So I can talk authoritatively. I'm very much trained. So you could see that sort of grand solidarity.
So in Malawi,
Yes.
MCP is back.
MCP is back.
In Uganda, is UPC making ways to come back?
UPC will certainly come back.
Come back.
Yes.
That day will come.
That day will come. That
No,
day will come.
I love the passion. I love the passion. And of course, if UPC had 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 1,000 of
Yeah,
you,
because UPC, as I have explained, its taproot is deep. It is only these side roots which have been cut. But the taproot is still deep,
grounded.
very deep.
Asante. Well, Mr. Producer, help me know whether my guests on Zoom are actually ready. But I need to engage them. I need to have them. But let me come to you, Nduguru Garama, as we try to find connections to the US and to South Africa, where we're supposed to have the other panelists also joining us on our Pan-African Friday. Let me hear your thoughts on these independence parties in our modern Africa.
Let me try to historicize this. That almost all the independence parties have one thing in common, that they were revolutionary. And like my colleague Akor observed, especially with the example of Osejefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the spirit and the vigor, the ideology that drove Kwame Nkrumah and the attainment of independence. When you look at his independence speech, it was not the kind of ideology that would sit well with the quote-unquote departing colonialist. The emergence of people like Emile Patrice Lumumba and the umbrella under which he came onto the DRC political front line was not the kind of the expectation that the Belgian government and the cahoots in America via CIA wanted to hear. Because right from the 60s, even before that, because right from when King Leopold carved out Belgium as his personal empire, and the subsequent players in the DRC, it was never meant to entertain the likes of Patrice Emery Lumumba. Now, what therefore I'm saying is that the progressive forces, the minds at that time, on the African continent, who were bringing independence, the umbrella of the political parties that you may want to talk about, that they were coming under, the ideology and the philosophy with which they were attaining independence was a recipe for coups that certainly followed, as you witnessed in the 70s and the 80s on the African continent. That therefore in West Africa, in East Africa, in Central Africa, all the forces, all the progressive forces that and countries that attained independence with the strong Pan-African philosophy and ideology, either were removed through coups or altogether assassinated. Now, what does that tell you? It therefore explains that the independence political parties were weakened from the start, and what came as a result, or the forces that occupied those umbrellas under which the very first leaders came, were a dilute version. Now, that explains why, for instance, we had and we still have the challenges, developmental post-colonial challenges, which up to now we have. Had we, for starters, stayed with on the trajectory of the political pedestal that Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Cabral, the Mariam Julius Nyerere, the Jomo Kenyattas of this world, the Patrice Emery Lumumba of this, had we stayed on that political trajectory, Africa would have been very different on the overall developmental path. But because that didn't happen, because of the invisible imperialistic, and my brother, senior brother from UPC, talked about it in his elaborate submission, suffice to add that that could not happen because actually the phrase post-colonial, has the colonial man left that we should be talking about his this post phase? No, this man has not left. Therefore, we should not take off the boxing gloves, thinking, therefore, that we have now gotten out of the ring and the bout contest, the boxing contest, is over. The physical liberation of the African continent, chasing away the white man, was simply tactical. And the white man has reinvented himself, and he has come now very ferociously and aggressively through imperialism. Probably, by the way, his art and science of delivering his message and extracting the resources from the African continent is even worse than when he was present here.
Okay.
It is therefore my submission that the independence political parties metamorphosized by force to kind of political party or political parties that were lukewarm. The original ideologies with which, and the power with which they were to deliver Africa, was watered down by the imperialists, and that has not changed. The present day political parties, save a few, and even the original ones, maybe as I conclude on this, let me say this, even the original ones that probably stayed, the ANC cannot wake up now and do what senior comrade, may his soul rest in eternal peace, Robert Mugabe did, redistribute land. Land question in South Africa is the panacea to development. If they do not address it, and there is a political imbalance as it is in South Africa, we are not going to get the South African. Apartheid is still existing in a manner that you need to have a very sharp and clear eye to see that actually this is apartheid at its best. ZANU-PF, when Robert Mugabe insisted he was branded a dictator, at the same time the economy of Zimbabwe was collapsed. When you get pedestrian thinkers, forgive my language, they will tell you that because of the dictatorial tendencies that Robert Mugabe and his cahoots under ZANU-PF exhibited, there is no way. They killed the economy. That is why his statements, you must have watched this. It was Christian Amapawa interviewing Robert Mugabe, and then he reminded him about the statement by the Bishop Desmond Tutu. And of course there was that fracas. That notwithstanding, I can assure you that even in Chama Penduzi here, and we talked about it, as one of the old political parties, independence political parties, that have tried to retain the color and the scent of originality, they make sure, and the late Magufuli, his attempt to make sure that he goes back to the original principles
Of the CCM.
Of the CCM. What? I'm not. Well, that laughter has
The laughter has actually killed you. The laughter has said it all.
It has said it all.
The laughter has said it all.
I want to submit to us that the independence political parties, the vigor and the zeal, the ideology and the philosophy died in its infancy. The revolutionary political parties that came later on, the ZANU-PF, the CCM and what have you, they have not successfully managed to deliver their countries to the promised land.
Hold it there. I am now told Ebrima Balde, a journalist from the Gambia. He's a Gambian journalist based in New York. He's now just right with us here. He's been practicing journalism for quite a long time, and of course also once worked with the national broadcaster in the Gambia. Ebrima, can you now hear us? Okay, well now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. And,
good.
Good. It's morning in Kampala, East Africa. I do not know what the time is where you are.
It's just 2 minutes to 2 a.m. It's so early in the morning here in New York.
Well, thank you very much for having allowed to talk to us at the wee hours of the night. You talk about 2 a.m. now, that's deep in the night, but I thank you for making time to be part of our program here, our Pan-African show. And it is what we are. We welcome you. Thank you so much for having made it here. And of course, let's get to these issues. Speak to us as a journalist who has been practicing, and one, of course, who studied history at the university. What your submission could be on Africa's independence parties in today's Africa and in modern politics. And it is what we are. We welcome you. Thank you so much for having me here. And of course, let's get to these issues. Speak to us as a journalist who has been practicing, and one, of course, who studied history at the university. What your submission could be on Africa's independence parties in today's Africa and in modern politics.
Thank you so much. It's very interesting. I've been following the discussions from the start of the program, and I think this is a very pertinent topic when you take a look at the present situation in West Africa. It's unfortunate that what had obtained in the 60s and 70s or the 80s is now prevailing in Africa, in West Africa, so to speak. So when you take a look at the present Africa, it's unfortunate that what had obtained in the 60s and 70s or the 80s is now prevailing in Africa, in West Africa, so to speak. So,
okay, there's just some mismatch. The delay in audio. Producer, please talk to Ebrima. Just help him. Let's have a clean connection. We very much want to have him and hear him and get his views, but we're still having a problem. We're still having a problem. I call.
Well,
come in the conversation as we get to Ebrima.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, I just wanted to pick it from where Ndugu
Christopher left
it. Because UPC and KANU in Kenya are actually playing the same politics. Because when you see Honorable Betty Among, who is actually a UPC, but serving in NRM, it means that UPC is already in power. That's what I talked about, being in power through the back door, through the window. You get it? Now, during last elections...
You'll not go to heaven.
You'll not go to heaven.
During last elections, you saw what happened in Lango, the stronghold of UPC. They say president, even the UPC president came out to say, look here, for president we are voting for NRM. But then maybe here, in some constituencies they would say, okay, that is in the stronghold of UPC in Lango. So implying that there is some kind of coalition between NRM and UPC, whether it is formal or informal, but it's, so the same thing with KANU. KANU in Kenya, it is very clear this in the last election they supported Jubilee. Yes, they supported
yes. Isn't it out of political maturity?
Yes.
Because in when we're celebrating, I think it was in 2011. In 2011, when we were celebrating our 49th independence anniversary, we had that in Boma Grounds in Lira. And we saw the Honorable Jimmy Akena leading UPC members to actually come and be part of that. Now, in 2013, when we had the celebrations in Rukunjiri, we saw Dr. Kiza Besji of the FDC shunning and actually trying to disorganize what was happening in his home district in Rukunjiri. 2 years earlier, we had actually seen UPC being part of the national celebrations. When it went to Rukunjiri, a new party now, new of course than UPC, which is the FDC, they didn't seem to have anything to do with Uganda's independence. Is it about ideology? Is it about political maturity? Or what? Today, we look at a party like the National Unity Platform, a new party, seemingly vibrant, leading in the opposition, saying, no, we cannot, we cannot even just belong to IPOD. It's a formation that was put there. They came to parliament with this arrangement already in place. When they got here, they say, we are here as the leaders in the opposition, but will not be part of the IPOD. Exactly. So what does that mean? UPC with a few members, 9 or 10 members, say, oh, here is where we are. The other day you see a bill, they're leading the delegation as the Secretary General going on. The rest say we can't for whatever reasons. Is it because of maturity? Is it because you will notice that similarly the parties in Kenya, the way KANU behaves, the old KANU, is not the same way UDA behaves, URP behaves, not the same way TNA behaves. You even now can't find Jubilee Party, and quite a number of those.
Where is KANU?
You can't find them. What could be happening?
No, I think what Comrade Luanga did say, the independence parties were rooted in ideology. The people who formed the parties that came together, at the bottom of their mind, at the bottom of their heart was the liberation of their countries from colonialism. But upon attaining independence, a reality hit in that running a government and running a movement for independence are two different things. And it is that reality that set most of the party in disarray. Because you realize, yeah, you are saying the colonialists must go, but now you're in government, you realize you still need the colonialists, because ideally the structure, the administrative structure that was left behind, the military that was left behind was the colonial masters' structures. So now that is the reality that comes in. Actually, when you read a book by Peter Abrahams, A Wreath for Udomo, it tells you exactly what most parties and leaders after independence went through. That reality that, look here, fighting for independence, for freedom, and getting into power, they are two different things. Now, parties like MCP, Malawi Congress Party, have taught independence parties that the best way to get back to power is through building bridges. Yes, you have to make coalitions with existing opposition parties, or if need be, with the party in power. Because actually, Lazarus Chakwera would not have won that election if he had not actually coordinated with other parties that were once actually in power. Interestingly, that Kamuzu Band, interestingly, is that Bakili Muluzu, who defeated MCP, his party supported Lazarus Chakwera. So you see, these are issues that in politics we do not have permanent enemies. The interest that in the 90s, Kamuzu Banda's party and that of Bingwa Mtarika were enemy, were rivals. But now, years later, we are seeing the two parties working together.
But what brings them together?
To dislodge. What brings them together is are the circumstances of the
What
day.
are their centers of interest?
No, the center of in any political party, the utmost goal is winning an election, is power. Yes, is ascending to power. So if you are going to ascend to power, you must build bridges with the people you feel can help you ascend to power. Now, incidentally, the opposition parties that have been created, born after independence, have been radicalized, and that's why most of them never attain power, because they have failed to understand that politics is about negotiations, not only internal but also external, both internal and external negotiations, so that you can also have power. But even also sustaining power is all about building bridges. Okay. Yes, like of course what you're seeing NRM is doing in Lango, that we have to work with UPC for purposes of development in Lango. And also UPC says, yes, for purposes of continuity, we have to work with the establishment.
We go back to the ideological clarity that he talked about.
Yes, so until such a time when they can also build their own what? Their own capacity. Now, and in some countries, definitely the independence parties have long been, they are no more. For example, if you go to Nigeria, Nadia Zikiwe's party, surely you can't find it anywhere, because eventually it was taken up by the Biafra. Yes, most of the members joined the Biafra, and since then it has really, the party actually has totally been lost in that.
It was tribal.
Yes.
It was oh well,
yes.
Just been told that Ebrina seems to be better now. If he is, let's see. Can you now hear us? Okay, and do you think you now have a better connection? Unmute your audio. Unmute your audio.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Can you now hear us?
Yes.
Very good. You had started submitting to us. Can we just get back to where we are and listen to your submission?
Say it again.
Can we just get back to where you are? Let's now get your submission. You were submitting before we lost you, but I think you're now good and better where you are. Come back to the conversation.
Okay, thank you so much for the invite. This is a very interesting program. I've been following it. Unfortunately, I've not been able to participate due to technical glitches, which I understand, but it's a very informative program. And like you said, I think the trajectory in Africa West Africa is a sad case. Well, I think history has, to some extent, consumed the independent parties. The parties that actually form part of the struggle for independence. Like in the case of the Gambia, where I come from, my native country, the ruling party that had been there for so long, unfortunately, was ousted through a military coup after being in power for almost 30 years. That is the PPP, the People Progressive Party. So you look at Ghana's CPP, Kwame Nkrumah's party. Unfortunately, Nkrumah was also ousted from power, by the military. So in West Africa, the trend was not actually a comfortable one for the ruling parties, because to some extent they were authoritarian in nature, and it was more or less one-party system, and leaders were really becoming so autocratic. And the trend then was like independence, Pan-Africanism, that, it was all about fighting against anything like neocolonialism, fighting against anything that has to be like a bedrock towards Africa's independence, So that was a kind of militant approach. So if you look at the trend now, you tend to see that most of those parties have been metamorphosed into newer parties have been in existence for the past 20, 30 years. So it will be difficult to kind of pinpoint some of the parties. Like if you look at Mali, Mali had what they call USRDA, which was a party that, Modibo Keita was the founding father of the nation. So you tend to look at West Africa in general, the military coups tend to overshadow what the independent parties, as it were, did, to an extent that now the newer parties have now taken up a newer trajectory that is all about maybe inclusion, less to do with the militant approach that the founding fathers of the nations, of the respective countries were doing. So in a nutshell, I would say the independent parties, their role now in the modern politics, as it were, as you put it in your in the main discussion for this TV show, is that I think they've now become, in my opinion, archaic in the sense that they did what they had to do in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And now it's a newer form of Africa's struggle towards not only independence, but it's about marching with the changing rhythm, another wave of development. Less, like I said earlier, it has less to do with the militant approach of saying the white man is bad, the black man has to liberate themselves, the black man has to do everything on themselves. Because now you talk about globalization, so that has now become the new order of the day.
The Gambia, we just saw in 2016 when President Ndama Barrow, or candidate Ndama Barrow hosting the man who had been there, Yahya Jammeh, who had been there for close to 2.5 decades. He came on, and of course he had a whole term. Then just recently, during the recent elections, we again still had to see things that were not very seamless. We had expected that after Yahya Jammeh, the coming in of Ndama Barrow would actually have that very seamless transition in a country that had yearned for some change from the autocratic leadership of Yahya Jammeh. Are things getting better in the Gambia, looking at the political terrain today, or you in the Gambia think you've not really made any strides even after Yahya Jammeh?
Yeah, if you look at Yahya Jammeh, in the beginning, like when he came to power, a lot of people were getting tired of the one-man rule of Sadauda Jawara, being at the helm of affairs of the nation since the 1960s to 1994. So it was like he was becoming too autocratic to some extent. Even though internationally the Gambia was recognized like as a democratic state, with multi-party system, but he was the only man ruling. And he was the only one since the country gained independence who had been in power. So there has been so much of, kind of a very compromised guy who couldn't actually, be firm on so many issues. There was a lot of corruption, so to speak. So Yahya Jammeh, the military coming to power was not good for democracy. But some Gambians thought it was time that something happened. That was a change, there were reforms. So Yahya Jammeh came on that bandwagon. Unfortunately, the military, they are not to be trusted. So when they come to power, they have different ideas. And when he came to power, he promised that after 2 years of transition, he was going to hand over power and go back to the barracks, but that was never to be. So in a nutshell, he metamorphosed himself into the political scene and then became president and was winning elections like Jawara was doing. So it's like, when you come to power, you see a lot of things. So Barrow also, when he came to power, through a grand coalition, unfortunately in Africa, coalitions are not, very good when it comes to, living on their words. Most of the time they renege on their promises. So when Barrow, the coalition came to power, it was a coalition of 7 parties that ousted Jammeh out of power. So he said after 2 years or after 3 years, he was going to hand over power. He was not going to stand. But then when the time was getting nearer, he was becoming entrenched. People had trusted that he was the right guy, to rule the nation. He started reneging on his promise and said, well, when you are coming to power, you say a lot of things, but when you come to power, the reality dawns on you. So, but again, the worst civilian is better than a military, any type of military government. So one can say that Barrow's coming to power is really better than how Jammeh was in power, even though to some extent, when we look at the security situation of the Gambia now, it's very precarious, and he seems to be a very not kind of a proactive leader who will respond to issues with immediacy. So that's where we are as at the moment.
Just before I come back to studios, we all agree that the independence parties had a mission, and one of their cardinal missions or roles was to liberate Africa, to bring this independence, to fight colonialism. We had Ari alone had from one of the panelists in studios who detailed to us these various conferences, the Manchester Conference, the All African Conference, and several other conferences that we saw happening, taking the example of Gandhi in the India, of course, seeing that independence coming on, and we got the wave came, and we saw that happening to us. Then eventually we also got to see revolutions coming on. For the political parties that we have today that have virtually taken away, we've also noticed that there are those old political parties, save for the ANC in South Africa. But when you come to Tanzania, the TANU, which is now the CCM, has held on to power for decades. When you go to, we've seen MCP in the Malawi, ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe. There are those, but of course, when you look at the continent in general, there are these new political parties, of course, that have come on now with the claims of solving today's problem. But you look at us as being on the right trajectory for the Africa that we all dream of, with the political parties now that we have at the helm and at the forefront.
Yeah, the trajectories have to change because the systems are no longer what it was. Then people were talking about liberation, and then there was so much racism, entrenched racism to an extent that, Africans then were not educated to that level. But now we've seen a wave where, what was there in the 60s is no longer there. So you cannot continue to have that kind of rhetoric that Africans are for Africans, like the Marcus Garvey philosophy, Africa for Africans, European for Europeans. I mean, that's no longer the case. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are not supposed to be Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism in the 60s and Pan-Africanism now are quite different. It doesn't necessarily mean it has been diluted, but again, look, we have to come together and see how we can fight our commonalities and come together. Like, for instance, we're talking about climate change. There are things that tend to bind us together. There are things also that each of us have to fight in our own respective African nations. So to say that the rhetoric in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, that has to continue now. That's why I said earlier that those independent parties that struggle, from part of the struggle for Africa's independence, are becoming archaic with ideas, because you cannot continue to beat that drum of African liberation, that Africa has to be liberated. We don't have to, do business with IMF, like, for instance, we know in Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara, was having that tone, that rhetoric. So it did not go down well with him. So, no country can be an island. You really have to do business with people. In the long run, you run dry, and everyone will try to avoid you. And then that's what happened to so many other nations, not only in Africa, even beyond Africa, like, for instance, Latin America, look at Venezuela, look at Cuba. And Africa tends to draw inspiration from some of those countries. That's why, to some extent, some of these so-called revolutionaries in Africa, when they come, they drum those beat the drum, and then get support from, the elite or students mostly, or from the youth that Africa has to fight. We have to look. We are not an island. you really have to go and get goods from Uganda. You have to get goods from Mali. You have to go to Europe. You can't say you can't do business with anyone. So for me, I think what is happening now with the newer parties, with the new system, it doesn't mean that, like I said, they have been diluted, but they really have to think about the realities of our current situation and match it along with what we can do to better the continent, to move the continent forward, rather than being so, theoretical, riding on archaic ideas, riding on things that, cannot be implemented, so that's my take anyway.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yes, let me come back to studios, yeah?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. There's something which I'm just taking it up from a statement we has just made, that we cannot be an island. I agree. Africa cannot be an island, like any other continent cannot be an island. Although we have got some continents which think they are actually islands. But you see, I must state to the public that it is my conviction that Africa must choose her friends. It is unfortunate that some continents, especially the imperialist hegemonic continents like America, thinks that she can be our friend at her own terms. That's what the problem is. Africa, and the other aspect he also talked about was in respect of the rhetoric, that the Pan-African of the 60s cannot be, the Pan-Africanism of 60s cannot be the Pan-Africanism of today. Maybe. But I'm reminded of our divinity lessons, the continuation and discontinuation of the OT into the new T. Old Testament into the New Testament. Now, what must Africa take from the Old Testament into the New Testament?
Exactly.
Now, to me, therefore, there is quite a lot. If you go back, for instance, to the speech, the 1963 speech by Osejefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, I would use that one as the proof. I don't think there is fundamentally anything that Kwame Nkrumah said that the modern times have changed, that we cannot use it as a blueprint for the development of Africa. Those two comments, I wanted to make them very clear from his submission. Now, I want to say that we must, as a matter of urgency, look at the characterization, because we have at least all agreed as to the ideological clarity of the independence political parties on the African continent. The panel here and away has at least talked about that, and we have agreed that, look, they were about the political, physical liberation of the African continent, to the extent that a man like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said, the independence of Ghana is meaningless without the entire Africa attaining her independence. Now, what therefore is the question to me, and I think you posed it, although we haven't had time to discuss it, is what is the post-independence political parties on Africa character as far as carrying the Pan-African agenda is concerned. My take is that we have got political parties now which are not the independence parties, the original independence parties as we know them on the African continent, from wherever you want to look at it from, which are lacking, with all due respect, on ideological clarity. They are formed for purposes of getting into power, sharing the cake, as they call it, but as far as the deliverables are concerned, it is still a very big problem. So much is the problem now that Africa, with the current political parties we have, the characterization is as follows. Ndugu Akor here told you that the party that brought independence in Nigeria was sorrowed by Biafra. Can you imagine? Biafra was simply a secessionist agenda. That we, the highly educated and economically empowered Igbo, must create a state and we cannot live with the Fulani. Kanu, who was in Kanu? Just down here, which tribe was in Kanu? Even when it washed itself, it skinned itself and went into some other form, who are there? What is the political party that my brother, our senior brother, Odinga, is heading? Who are majorly the people there? When you come, therefore, you see, this is a very big debate that Ndugu Jagenda you have really started. But let me conclude on it by saying that we have got our post-independence political parties on the African continent characterized by religion. Which religion? If it is DP, it is Catholic. And it will be headed by a Catholic, and worst case scenario, a Uganda. If Norbert Mao is coming on board, you must be fought. You must be fought openly or clandestinely. Subterranean movements must be made to undermine your regime. This is what we are having. If it is not by religion, it will be by tribe. That for us, we are the Igbo, and the structure that the white man left in place was such that it is tribal, it is clan, it is religion, it is empowering a certain section of the community against another, and therefore the creation of the political parties post-independence was meant to galvanize and ensure the entrenchment of imperialism through the so-called democracy, which is pseudo-democracy.
Okay. Well, Ndugu, yes, you're coming in, I think, to pick it up from there, or from where Brima left it. But you see, all of us talk about this and say, Ndugu Brima here from the Gambia, who is actually in the US now, says, we need to agree that we are dealing with archaic parties. Now, these are parties that out of ideas, they've grown and they've done all the things too. What has kept the DP in the US for all these years? Because I think it's a party that started in the early 20s of the other century, 1820 something. They've been there until today. Somebody thinks there are only two political parties in the US. They talk about the DP, they talk about the Republicans. But these are parties that have managed to metamorphose themselves into the challenging times of the day, bit economics, bit social, bit etc. What is it that our political parties are actually failing to do? To rebrand, to look like the days are, like the things seem to be, to bring on board the young Brimazia to actually join the old traditional political parties?
Well, thank you very much. I think in the US, the two major parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, they have taken time. Yes, because this is something that they've built over time. Yeah, and secondly, that the party has built capacity and institutions that favor talent development. Otherwise, if it wasn't for the case, then people like Obama surely wouldn't have come on board as president.
And that's my biggest
Dr.
concern.
Umar Johnson would disagree.
Why?
He says he was a project.
Why wouldn't we allow our own political parties to also grow? And many years from today, we'll look at them like we see the Democrats in the US.
That is where I'm coming to. Now, in Africa, incidentally, like Rugarama did put it, most countries, the politics have been swallowed by religion and tribalism. For example, where my brother Brima Balde comes from in Gambia, to win an election, one, you must be a Muslim. To win an election, you must be from the Mandingo tribe. And why Adam Abaro stood a chance is that he's both a Mandingo
and a Muslim.
And the mother is from the Fula, who are actually the second largest tribe, and is a Muslim. So the combination of the three gave him really a very outstanding advantage.
Forget other
so it's not about so our politics is still petty. That even if you came, Professor Pierre Lumumba has always made it clear that he campaigned in almost the 250
he held the town hall meetings, 240 town halls.
Yes, you get it. But he did not give anything in terms of logistics. But the competitor, who did not even hold any meeting the day before election, came with the logistics and won the election. So this is how politics in Africa is. Even when they are, I'll give an example. When Kanu was being dislodged in 2002, you remember Moi calling it, he called it a cocoon of tribal chiefs coming together to dislodge Kanu. That's what happens. Because in countries where there has been an independence party, they will come up with parties that are bringing together the major tribes to dislodge. The same thing with Ghana. Why CCP is actually nowhere was because the Ashanti, who are really the majority, never embraced it. Yes, never embraced it.
And can you imagine?
And so these are realities that we are living with. Now, when Mugabe realized that, yes, he comes from the Shona, who are the majority tribe, he also used the tribal card to sustain power. Yes, and you see now in Zimbabwe, it is unwritten rule that being a president, you have to be a Shona. Yes.
Okay, what is happening to us? The young man here from the Gambia, who is in the US, says our liberation parties have archaic ideas and they can't rhyme with the times today, and that's why they are running away from you. Uganda People's Congress, you were here, and we date you back into the 60s. Some years later, the UPC is not here. Wouldn't you want to see the Uganda People's Congress being here forever?
I would actually disagree
with him,
with my brother from America. We are not archaic as such. It is, if anything, it is the new emerging political parties which are more archaic than the old independence ideological political parties.
Thank you so much.
How come?
Yeah,
how can the new again be archaic?
This is because
it's too philosophical.
Yes, this is because for the independence political parties, we are for national integration, we are for continental integration, we are for global integration. Now, the new ones which have come in, they are for first-class balkanization. I may not even go very far. You can just look at Uganda in its current setup. How much we have been balkanized. I happen to be born in Impigi district, and our burial grounds are in Rwanga, near Impigi town. But look at me now. My home is now in Wakiso district. I cannot link up with Impigi. My other relatives have been thrown in Gomba, which is another district, and others have been thrown in Butambala. And there is another threat that even Wakiso is too big, we are going to cut it. I don't know where you will be thrown,
You don't
whether in Entebbe, whether in Wakiso. At the same time, I must walk and join East African community. What am I taking in East African community? Am I taking a totally unified Republican Uganda, or am taking a Uganda which is broken up into pieces? Okay? And our brothers who are in the new political parties, who are in the new movement, they are not realizing it, that we have weakened ourselves from the domestic base. This is now cutting across, such that the old ideological political parties were integrative, were focused, and were building for the future. Now, where we are caught up, and you are seeing this mess, everywhere there is a godfather. Our enemies first cleared the godfather. A country like Yugoslavia was a strong opinion. Yugoslavia built here our conference center. In Zambia, they built a conference center. They did a lot of infrastructure work through Enago. And all that work which they were doing were benefiting. But Yugoslavia was bundled into, disintegrated into 6 countries. So as we are looking towards Yugoslavia, we have no godfather to look at. Look at the Soviet Union and the good job it did in the liberation and the decolonization struggle. Forces caught up with the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union disintegrated.
Collapsed.
In fact, Putin regretted that we did this mess came up. We ignored our satellite countries like Cuba, India, what have you. And now we have to bring back the relationship. So we are in a sort of wilderness. We don't have the natural godfathers we used to have. Neither do these new emerging political parties have the real godfathers. And their space has been taken away mainly by NGOs.
But what is
and
the agenda?
They are not pushing the politics agenda. They are more trying to be liberal. But I'm very happy that a new leader in Zambia has said, let us go back to the roots. What is education? Let us ensure that education is affordable, it is free, and it is of quality. And we move. When we can move in that angle, then we can try to handle other aspects. Such that you are going to see that even as you walk out of your home, you are going to cry UPC. Yes, this government of today and its political party has also realized the mess they did, that to hold Uganda as a country, you need to bring back key parastatal bodies. And when you bring back a key parastatal bodies, you are remobilizing the country. You are moving in a certain direction that you are going to have your own resources to attend to the needs of people. Such that I'm very happy when the government brings back a Uganda Airlines. I'm very happy when the government brings back a cooperative. So the names may differ, SACCO, Operation Wealth Creation. It is a concept which is aiming at the welfare of a common person. How it is done, it needs UPC experience. NRM may not do it better. Okay, we can advise how they can proceed.
You can advise?
Yes, we can advise.
As UPC?
Yes, because you will need cadres who are not greedy. You will need cadres who are not corruptible. You will need cadres who just treasure to be buried in full honors. And this is what UPC does.
Treasuring to be buried in full
No, we are not here. We are not here for riches. We are here to serve the country. We are here to serve Africa. We are here to serve black race.
Okay.
That is what you need.
Let me go back to New York, where we have Ndugwe Brima. Come back to the conversation. You've had the gentleman in studios, yeah? Of course, partly agreeing with you on some points, but of course also disagreeing with you. When we come back to your own country, the Gambia, we noticed that the party in leadership now is just as old as 3 years. This is the party that was registered, I think, in 2019, and of course, it's in power here. And do you think it does really have that agenda? Because it doesn't even hold the majority in the National Assembly. Do you look at that as spurring the Gambia into the desired Gambia that you've all dreamt to see or have?
Yeah, thank you for giving that as an example. I agree with my panelists in some respect with regard to whether the new parties are archaic or the old parties are archaic. Okay, that depends on the interpretation and our subjective interpretation of the whole analysis of the debate. But for me, briefly, like you said, with regard to the new party now that we have in power, yet, because they haven't even had only one National Assembly member. Okay, that's a very classic example of the kind of archaic ideas I'm talking about, because the party that had been there for so long was the PPP, that's the founding father of the nation, that's Sadara Karabajawara. Then you come to the military man, Yahya Jammeh, the dictator who ousted Jawara out of power and then replace him with his ideas and with a party, that had also been in power for 22 years. So you see, we have two parties that have been dominant in Gambia's politics. First, we have the PPP and the APRC. Now, these are all parties now that have virtually been thrown to the dustbins of history. Okay? Yeah. Jammeh thought, he was going to be there forever and maybe hand over power to his son or his family members. But people realized the kind of atrocities that were committed during the 22 years of his reign. So with Barrow coming to power, the dynamics now have been, equal. It's like now everybody have the, like it's a silver platter, it's a cake. Everybody now can take their own portion of the cake and see what who Gambians we are going to listen to. The reason why I said the ruling parties or the independent parties were a cake for the Gambia, Sadauda was seen as a Democrat. We cannot compare him with even Barrow or even Jammeh. But people, it's time people move on. We cannot live, into yesterday's ideas. And like the gentleman said earlier, Africa has to choose its own friends. We cannot be dictated to. But unfortunately, we have darlings of the West in Africa, who, whatever they do, they're supported by their darlings, in the West. But like in the case of Gambia, for Barrow, the challenge now is for him to have a national assembly that he has to command a majority in the parliament. Okay, another panelist earlier mentioned that in the Gambia, he's well informed. He's actually well informed that we have tribal politics. And unfortunately, that's not only in the Gambia, it pervades, it's kind of cancer, in West Africa or in Africa in general, even Nigeria. I think we inherited this, from colonialism. You see, colonialism has really, unfortunately, this debate, I don't want it to be diverted into another dimension. But Africa's problems also has to do with the people who colonize us, because the mentality we have, among us, and even the way we carry ourselves. And the reason why I even said those founding fathers or the political parties were archaic is the rhetoric about, Africa has to develop, has to look inwards to develop itself. After, the white man for 400 years of control, so much of blame game. So you cannot continue to blame the colonial masters for everything. Sometimes we have to look within ourselves and see how we can move ahead, have friends, we choose our friends, like the gentleman earlier mentioned, and then we see what we can do with them. And then we see what we can look within us. Or sometimes when we don't have confidence in ourselves, and we think that we have to go to the West, you have to go to Brussels, you have to go to Washington, you have to go to China to get some development aid. Aid don't come, there's nothing like free lunch. Excuse my cliche. So, in a nutshell, just for some of my points, I think it's high time we move on, to whether the new parties are archaic or the old parties are archaic. What Africa needs right now is pragmatic leadership and going beyond the issue of talking about the past so much, belaboring on it. The blame game has to end. We have to move on, tackle the issues, and then see how we can better ourselves. Like we mentioned of two parties in the US, the Democrats and the Republican. I think for Africa, the reason why we have new parties or new ideas most of the time is the parties that come to power sometimes forget about our development problems or challenges. Take, for instance, Thomas Sankara, when he came to power, the name of Burkina Faso was Upper Volta. How did a young military man who was in his studies came up with the idea of a national vision for the country, changed the country, branded it? He ruled for 4 years, but I can tell you that for me, what he did for 4 years surpassed some of Africa's leaders who've been there for like 20 years. One, he rebranded the name of the country from Upper Volta to the land of upright people. That's a good branding. Okay? Well, military rules are bad, but for his case, it was necessity. Although he was also too, authoritarian to some extent. That is why, his rule ended abruptly like that. Like, for instance, if you cannot make peace with West, you are so much centered on, Burkina to an extent that you don't want to even compromise a little bit. So sometimes it creates problems because the West do not actually want to see Africa, rule by itself without having friends, because there are a lot of resources in Africa. So whoever whichever African leader come to power and say you are going to close Africa to the development aid or the development partners, you're going to have problems. You really have to see how you can.
Thank you, Ebrima. Let me come back to you, and of course, this will be to all of this will be
compromise where necessary.
This will be to all of us, and I think you've made a very good submission here. When you just brought in the young man here, Thomas Sankara, because when you look at Thomas Sankara, now coming Blaise Compaoré, from Blaise Compaoré, we've seen Blaise Compaoré was, I think, overthrown in 2015, and from 2015 to 2022, in a span of 7 years, you've seen the turmoil and the disorganization in that country, from Micah Fando coming in of Roch Kabore, and the disorganization that is actually happening in the country there. But just before you get off the screen, Ndugu Ebrima here, we noticed that, yes, we agree, the independence parties had an ideology of actually seeing Africa get liberated, and of course chasing and sending away the colonialists. Now the new parties here today, of course, are running back to those same people for solutions onto the continent. You notice that every new political party here that wants to get power, they will say we are aligning with X, Y, and Z, and it's been the biggest problem to us on the continent. In your country, the Gambia, you just had elections sometime last year, and you notice that you hear from, of course, the election had to go up to court. There were those who said we are not comfortable with the results, and of course they had to take Andama Barrow to court, and court had to say he was validly and legitimately elected, so he can take oath of office and be there. But there are those disgruntled the Gambians who, after 5 years, still think Barrow is not giving them the best, and they had to go to court. Now, what you notice is they will tell you until the EU comes to monitor our elections, there will not be credible elections. You will not find many Gambians demanding to see ECOWAS come to monitor elections in the Gambia. You will not see many Ugandans demand to see a majority of or ESC coming. We won't demand from the Pan-African Parliament to come and monitor our elections. We only think it's a credible process if we have the European Union and some other forces somewhere. And I think this is where it is. What happens now that our forefathers, during their liberation, were chasing away colonialists. In our day, we actually say they have the solution to our problems. Is this helping Africa? Is this helping us? Because we are going back to where our fathers and forefathers took us from. What's your take on that?
Well, I think you really strike home a very, very interesting point. And the parallel, I have nothing else to add except to just to buttress the points you've mentioned. We don't have faith in ourselves. Largely because maybe we think we are compromised, or we think that somehow we are conflicted. So we tend to look at the West as the saviors, as the people who can validate us. So when you lack self-confidence, that's the problem. You need validation, and validation is so most of the time is biased, because who is there to validate you? The one validating you himself is biased. So you really have to look inwards and accept realities on the ground. Like in the case of the Gambia, this is a precedent. Yahya Jammeh, unfortunately, went to the polls with Barrow and congratulated him. But then there were irregularities with the electoral tally, and then the Electoral Commission came back a few days later to say that there were some errors. Yahya Jammeh reneged on his promise to hand over power and said, no, in fact, we have to go back to the polls. Unfortunately, he couldn't go to challenge the results to court because he disbanded the Supreme Court. He never thought there was going to be any adjudication of the results or validation of the results. So to speak, now when we look at the examples we've given with regard to Burkina, East, West, and Southern Africa, the way we have to relate to outside institutions to validate what we do, there will always be problems. Like in the case of the Gambia, the opposition have to say that the election was stolen. But the court also interpreted and said, no, nothing happened as far as we are concerned. So, that, because the thing is, the ruling party that Barrow happens to form, within a short while, they believe that that party couldn't just muster courage to convince Gambians to vote for him overwhelmingly. So that's why the opposition, they are still traumatized with the loss of the election. And they cannot really take it. They cannot really process it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Just before, we will come back in 1 minute to say bye to you, but we don't go. Still keep with us here. Gentlemen, let's end on that note. What is happening to us that the old political parties, of course, were looking for liberation. The new political parties here today, again now, in bed with those who are perceived to be Africa's enemies. What is happening? We are running back to them to sort our problems, to manage our countries, to manage our everything, to manage our everything. We run and say we need to run to the European Parliament, we need to run to this African, to the US, we need to run everywhere to actually get solutions to problems. And I think that also seems not to be solving our problems forever. I'll start with you, move on like that, and we'll go back to New York where we'll end the conversation.
Yeah, what you're saying reminds me of Kwame Nkrumah's statement. That at one time, I think in the 60s, before he was ousted, he said that he's afraid that at one point, the African leaders will disappoint the Africans, and the Africans will resort to calling back the colonialists. So I think because now we have failed to, the leaders have failed to instill faith in the regional and continental institutions. And definitely that is why you see that when there's an election, people will believe more in the EU or UN than EAC or African Union, because the leaders themselves do not.
We are not demanding much from ECOWAS in the issues that are happening in West Africa. But we wait to hear from. We are waiting to hear from what France has to say. We are waiting to hear from what EU has to say. We are waiting to hear. And if you hear that sanctions have been slammed on Mali by the EU Parliament, then we say, now I think something is going to happen.
We are waiting for them to come.
We are waiting for them to come and sort Mali's problems. And not saying, when we hear and say, okay, AU are saying this, everybody will just push them away and say, what is AU? What is ECOWAS? What is all these things?
Ndugu Jagenda, I think all that is as a result of the fact that who has the capacity to bite? Because if in the East African community, maybe Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania say they are sanctioning, maybe Rwanda, Burundi, the impact may not be as felt as if it is the European Union, because we believe in aid. Our African leaders, when they get ill, they are treated that side. So when there is that sanction, even the common man feels that yes, it is something they are going to feel it. But surely speaking now, like for example, Uganda and Rwanda, the borders were closed and the leaders
for 3 years.
Everybody was yes. But so you can imagine, assuming maybe the sanctions are from out. So I think that is the whole issue.
Okay.
That the bottom line is that our leaders, the African leaders, have failed to instill faith.
Okay.
In their own institution, regional institutions, so that giving them the mandate that they deserve, so that they can actually monitor and do the panel beating for purposes of achieving a common strategic development as Africans.
Chairman of the Pan-African Movement, Uganda, 2 minutes.
Very quickly. One, I will start with America. In my opinion, the most undemocratic country, non-progressive, autocratic, dictatorial is America. They do not have the democracy they purport to preach. They have carried out coups in progressive democracies on the African continent and elsewhere. They have destabilized currently Venezuela. They have carried out in cahoots with their intelligence organizations through CIA, MM6, Mossad, coups on all the democracies on the African continent and elsewhere. They have carried out direct military attacks using the jackals, and therefore we have nothing as true democratic Pan-African people to learn from the American democracy. That is one. I have sorted it out. Two, the new political parties on the African continent cannot be compared in a majority of the cases with the independence political parties, post-independence political parties, and the subsequent revolutionary movements that metaphysized themselves into political parties had an agenda of physical liberation of the African continent and later on ideological liberation of the African continent, which now we are struggling with. The emerging political parties are not organically formed, and therefore they look up to the dictatorial regimes in Europe and America because they lack ideological clarity. Three, and finally, we have got a duty as Pan-Africanists to make sure that the political parties which are taking on the reins of government must be clear on ideology. And it is our duty to support all those progressive political parties which we know that subscribe to the agenda of delivering to the people, regardless of what the pseudo-democratic European hegemonic imperialistic so-called democratic countries purport to be preaching to us. Okay. I thank you.
Ndugu Rwanga, in 1.5 minutes, then 1 minute will be for Ebrina.
I think I can summarize my talk by making a reflection on 27th May 1980, when our founding father, Dr. Apollo Milton Obote, came back from exile in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, where I had spent 8 to 9 years. The coming back to Bushenyi was facilitated by Mulungushi Club and Uganda government. Zambia provided an aircraft, Tanzania provided an aircraft, and Bushenyi now became the rebirth of Uganda. And as Dr. Apollo Milton Obote was making a speech, he appealed for international election observers from African EU and from Commonwealth. And he ushered in a spirit of reconciliation, a spirit of unity, and he told us several things that if we don't follow these things, we shall be in trouble. That free spirit, that sort of atmosphere which was in the Bushenyi, which rocked the entire Uganda, gives you hope that once we put our politics in order, we look at reconciliation, we look at forgiveness, we can move. And then lastly, we still need the godfathers. Don't underestimate the coming up of BRICS states. This is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They should just intensify their speed of doing things. When Africa is having where to lean, things balance up easily.
Okay.
Now we are not leaning, we are in the wilderness. So I'm concluding that all is not lost. The independence political parties must be encouraged to shoulder on the fight. They are not a cake, they provide the best hope.
Okay.
Other new ones have come and melted like a big crowd with no rain.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ebrina, will you have your concluding remarks before we let you go?
Thank you so much. Well, I would not spend more than, maybe less than a minute. I'll just say, for Africa also, African institutions such as ECOWAS, SADC, the East African Community, to be taken seriously, our regional institutions, they must also be seen to be honest in their dealings, and they must also confront leaders who are defaulting in their administration. For instance, let me give an example, a typical example of ECOWAS. Look at Guinea's new military leader, Colonel Mamadou Doumbouya. When he came to power, the reason why he came to power, you see, I would just borrow a terminology or a common phrase that the late J.J. Rawlings used to say, that a coup will not succeed if the conditions are not right. In Guinea, when Alpha Conde was reneging on his promise for a third term, where was ECOWAS? This is not to say I'm justifying military rules, but sometimes our leaders also renege on their promise. Power is so sweet, it's an intoxicant. so they become so naive to an extent that they want to, the population is gullible, so they want to ride on that so-called bandwagon that they are popular. And in the end, the military will not also see to it that one man rule will continue to perpetuate, himself, to power. So in a nutshell, I'm just saying that for Africa for these regional institutions to be taken seriously, they must confront leaders before actually the fire is on the mountain. That's my concluding remark.
Thank you very much, Ndugwe Brina. We thank you so much for enduring and, of course, allowing to talk to us at these wee hours of the night where you are in the New York. Thank you so much. Next time we have another conversation like this, we'll invite you, we'll call you in and be part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Very welcome. Brina is a young man with a passion for the continent of Africa. He's a journalist and formerly worked with a national broadcaster in the Gambia. He's from the Gambia, even though based in New York right now. And of course, he's given us his thoughts and what he thinks about what Africa needs to look like. Thank you so much, Ndugu Akol Mande Amazima, a co-panelist here, and of course, our radio panelist, Ndugu Rugarama, the chairman of the Pan-African Movement Uganda, and of course, my brother, Christopher Rwanga, the head of ideology document and the other department, the other
research
and research from the Uganda People's Congress, and of course also a patron of the Mlungushi
Club.
Mlungushi Club. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Monday, I beg your pardon, Ndugu Mtuta was not with us, and of course, our other sister, Dlamini Batha from the ANC, also couldn't make it, but we hope to have her next time. We thank you so much. We, of course, want to thank our producer, and of course, thanking all the team that we've worked with to do this and to have a Pan-African Friday a success. Forgotten My Country, just wish you the very best of the weekend until we talk again on Friday next week. God bless you. Forgotten My Country. Stay blessed.
It's Freaky Friday from Airtel. Buy or gift. Buy or gift.
Get freaky too! Dial *149*10# to load a Freaky Friday bundle for you to enjoy the best offers on voice and data.
To buy a bundle for friends and family, dial *149*10*5#. Freaky Friday with Airtel. Buy or gift a bundle today. Dial *149*10# to get started. Airtel, the smartphone network.
It's time to learn. Schools are open. As a student, school life is going to be different. You must follow the COVID-19 prevention measures, which